Merlin's Amiga Chronicles, Episode 1, The Fall of Camelot, Britain, 1148 AD.
Dark forces begin their assault on the castle stronghold known as Camelot, a relentless reanimated army of the dead that is replenished by the ranks of its fallen victims. An evil tide that is swept across the land, killing indiscriminately and without mercy. This was an army of death, forged from the bones of those who opposed it, and driven ever onward by the twisted will of the evil sorceress Morgana. It is her driving desire to take Camelot by force and utterly decimate all who oppose her. Within the walls are families and people of the land from both far and wide who desperately seek refuge and shelter from the evil horde.
The light of day has begun to fade, and yet the courageous knights of Camelot fight on valiantly
to keep the marauding horde from breaking through their ranks and reaching the castle walls, and those seeking protection within. Lancelot continues to wade through the evil tide, with a sword tightly gripped in each hand. Unstoppable in his efforts, he cuts down his enemies like dry wheat. "To me!" he bellows, as he plunges ever deeper into the horde. King Arthur continues to hold the line, however, accompanied by two fellow knights, Percival and Kay, one at each side. It seems in vain, as the battle draws to a foreboding conclusion. The knights grow ever weary, while the horde does not. Every army has its generals, and the horde is no exception, led by none other than Arthur's own wicked son Mordred, who is turned against him. In order to gain political power, Mordred has joined forces with the evil sorceress Morgana. Seeing such things as goodliness and kindliness as signs of weakness, Mordred utterly opposes everything his father stands for, and would see every knight destroyed. As Lancelot advances, Mordred seizes opportunity in Arthur's divided ranks, and calls for his father to engage him in single combat. Reluctantly, Arthur accepts the challenge, and with a heavy heart he breaks the line and steps forward to answer his son's challenge. And then, as if on cue, it begins to rain. "This isn't what I want," Arthur calls out to his son. "What you want, father, is irrelevant. Morgana has promised me Camelot, and all the land to the north." Mordred dismounts from his horse. "And in return?" Arthur calls back. "In return, nothing. Loyalty, it's nothing." Mordred's pause was long enough for Arthur to notice. They begin to circle around each other like hyena around prey. "You're wrong, my son. You see these men?" Arthur gestures to his fellow knights as the rain begins to trickle down his arm. A rumble of thunder crashes in the distance. A moment later, lightning rips the sky in two. "To Camelot and all it stands for, they're loyal. They live for the virtues of it and would die to protect it." Mordred adjusts his helmet, slaps his horse, and watches it disappear behind the curtain of rain. He wouldn't be needing it again today, his ego proclaimed. He takes a moment to answer his father. His lust for power is overwhelming. This is it, the moment he longed for. Just the two of them, and to the victor go the spoils. If that is their will, it shall also be their fate. Mordred raises his sword above his head and charges at his father. He swings the sword at Arthur's upper torso, but Arthur's sword sweeps the blow aside. As they begin to exchange blows, it is only Mordred's enchanted golden armour that stands him in good form against his father, and the fabled sword Excalibur. Golden armour enchanted by none other than Morgana herself, proclaiming that no blade could penetrate it, making its bearer almost invincible. Almost. Their swords clash again, and then again, the rain above them intensifying, as though seeking to cool the heat from the battle below. The mud beneath their feet grows thicker, making it increasingly difficult to stand, but Arthur is battle-hardened, and far more experienced than his younger opponent. They swing their swords, dodging and parrying each blow, Arthur swings Excalibur with a veteran's aim, but Mordred is swift, staying just out of reach time and time again. Mordred's agility, however, cannot last long as he rolls and dodges Arthur's attack. Arthur is eventually able to force Mordred back with one solid striking blow after another. Mordred stumbles, fatigued, and staggers in the mud, now unable to secure his footing. With this, Arthur is able to make his move and strikes out, cleaving Mordred's sword clean in two and sending both halves hurtling to the floor. Mordred, unbalanced, stumbles once again. Another carefully placed swing, and Excalibur catches Mordred beneath his shoulder plates. Wounded and exhausted, Mordred slumps to his knees in the thick mud. For each of them, this moment hangs in the air as if for an eternity. The battle that rages on around them seems to fall into silence, and the heavy breathing is the only thing that each hear. In the surrounding darkness of the landscape, the lightning storm intensifies. A flash of lightning from beyond the hillside illuminates Mordred's golden armour for a second before dying away. He clutches at his arm as the clouds slowly part and pass across the face of the moon. The sound of the wind returns to Mordred's ears as he coughs, spitting blood into his helmet. His wound seems too severe to win this fight. Glancing up, Mordred catches sight of Arthur, his father, now standing over him. Arthur takes a few deep breaths before he is able to speak. His chest heaves, yet his voice is calm and gentle as a father to a beloved son. "Please, my son, take my hand." Arthur drops Excalibur to his side. This is where he would draw the line, unwilling to take Mordred's life. He would instead offer his hand to his defeated son. Mordred remains silent as he desperately tries to catch his breath, his heart still pounding hard within his chest. He takes yet another deep breath and is finally ready to admit defeat. Kneeling in the thick mud, Mordred slides his hands to either side as he tries to regain his composure, but as he does, his palm meets something unyielding beneath its surface. What is this? Do the fates smile upon me? Mordred thinks as he tries to contemplate his next move. He raises his head just as a flash of lightning catches his father's eye. It's a small distraction, but it will have to do. The adrenaline refuels his anger. He would not be defeated this day. Rage fills his body once more, like a viper spitting venom. He bellows, "Never!" Mordred grabs his half-broken sword from beneath the mud. Leaping forward, he thrusts the broken blade deep into his father's chest. "Your kingdom, father, it shall be mine." Arthur, deeply wounded, stumbles backward, gasping for air. He hunches over, clenching his fists, but somehow he is able to remain standing. Arthur draws up, as if standing to attention, then rips the blade from his chest. Mordred's eyes grow wide, and then perhaps for the first time he knows fear. The man before him, the true king of the land, takes a step forward, a hand pressing to the rip in his armour. But even as the blood runs through the rivets across his breastplate, Mordred sees nothing but great strength and courage as the man before him centres himself. Arthur takes a further step towards him. Arthur's dignity does nothing to dampen Mordred's unholy rage. Slowly, Arthur begins to walk towards Mordred, and as he does, he looks deep into his son's eyes. Seeing only hate, Arthur realises now that he has lost him to evil forever, and the beast that stands before him must be slain. Arthur struggles to fight the conflict within himself. His only son and heir, now a minister to the dark forces. He takes two more final shaky steps and raises Excalibur above his head. "Camelot shall never fall to the likes of you." Utter terror fills Mordred's face, and with his final stroke, Arthur brings Excalibur down upon his wicked son. With one well-placed blow, Mordred's reign of terror is at an end. Arthur, unable to stand any longer, collapses to his knees as several knights manage to break free from the main battle and gather around their king. Their attempts to save him, however, seem in vain. With Mordred fallen, the battle is over. The horde, without guidance, will be easily dispatched. With his strength now leaving his body, Arthur slumps to the ground. Sprawling in the mud and in dreadful pain, he desperately calls out for his friend. "Merlin! Merlin! Where are you?" Arthur glances at Excalibur, the rain cleansing of his son's blood, and yet there is more to this moment. As the king sees the light within the sword begin to dim, a flash of lightning rips across the battlefield, separating the knights from what remains of the horde. A cloaked figure carrying a staff struggles to cross the mud.
I am here, my king.
Merlin's voice carries in the wind. His words are somehow comforting to Arthur, and is all that he hears. As Merlin approaches the king, the knights separate and Arthur reaches for Merlin's hand. Lancelot comforts his king, leaning behind him and keeping his head out of the mud. Arthur, shaking, takes Merlin's hand. Lancelot raises his gaze to Merlin as tears fills his eyes and rolls down his cheeks. "Can you save him?" Merlin looks sternly at Lancelot and without a word smiles gently down at Arthur. Lancelot grabs Merlin's arm. He continues, "Use your powers! Do something!" Merlin's voice is emotional as he watches his friend slipping away. "The powers over life and death are not mine to control. You know this." Merlin's words ring of truth. His gentle manner has a calming influence over all those around him. "Merlin, my mentor, my friend." Arthur coughs up blood as he struggles to finish his words. "Promise me but one thing." He stops to catch his breath. "Promise me she shall be defeated." Arthur slowly slumps back, Lancelot cradling his king's head as though he were an infant. Merlin leans over Arthur, his voice remaining calm even as his words are heavy with sincere conviction. "I give you my word this day. I will end it." Merlin's eyes flash with an eerie green mist as he stands. He looks over to Lancelot, then motions to two knights, turns swiftly and disappears into the night. The two knights struggle to follow after him, but Merlin easily outpaces both of them, moving almost ethereally. Arthur's wounds are terminal. Merlin knew this but would not say, and with the final breath Arthur beckons for Percival to come closer and whispers in his ear, "Return, Excalibur, to the Lady of the Lake, from whence it came." As the light begins to dim in Arthur's eyes, Merlin hastens his pace in pursuit of the evil sorceress Morgana, who hides deep within the catacombs that lie beneath the great castle. Morgana was once a pupil of Merlin and his magical arts, but had become corrupted by her own selfish desire for power. Her hate became her passion, her mind twisted. Her only desire now was to destroy Merlin and all that he and Arthur had accomplished. Deep within the catacombs, Morgana lay in wait for Merlin like a spider awaiting a fly. Her powers had grown far beyond the confines of her master's teaching, and now the time had come to succeed him. With only Merlin standing between her and total domination of the land, Morgana knows what she must do. Her carefully laid plan will bring this kingdom to its knees. Merlin, however, is still convinced that he can put a stop to his pupil's reign of terror and save her from her own evil path. He ventures ever deeper into the catacombs, unaware that he is walking right into Morgana's trap. The passageway finally opens up to reveal a large cavern illuminated by burning torches, and the air is heavy with the aroma of bubbling potions. Merlin knows the way like the back of his hand, as he uses this cavern himself as a place away from the distractions of the world, a place to cast his spells and keep watch over the land with his mystical sight. But as Merlin enters the final chamber, Morgana has already begun to cast a forbidden spell of dreams, a spell that can render the subject helpless. Merlin, taken totally by surprise, does not look down at the floor as he enters. With his focus completely on Morgana herself, unwittingly, Merlin steps into a hidden chalk circle. It is an ancient spell, one that her mentor had forbidden her to use. Her true intentions were unclear to Merlin, like looking through murky waters, and so certain knowledge had been forbidden to her. This enraged Morgana, and so she took to taking peeks at Merlin's personal chronicles as he slept, casting spells and practicing forbidden magic when her teacher wasn't around. She had become strong in their application, but without discipline and understanding, her mind slowly twisted. Around the circle she has placed 4 large crystals with mystical powers from a land far to the west. Once within the circle, Merlin finds himself unable to speak and begins to panic. Clutching at his mouth, he tries in vain to pull the words from his lips. The crystals are Morgana's focus, and they begin to hum and glow as she continues her incantation. Like fast-growing icicles, the crystals grow and spread across the ancient spell chalked on the floor, entrapping Merlin's feet and working their way up his legs and body. An evil smile spreads across Morgana's face as she utters the final words that will encase Merlin for all time within his crystal tomb. Unable to move and unable to speak, he can only watch as Morgana will undo all that he has accomplished. Merlin's face twists in terror as his body and his fate are irrevocably sealed. Morgana walks slowly across the room over to Merlin, cautiously, hesitantly. Slowly she runs her fingers up the newly formed crystal. Her plan had worked. The 4 crystals had reformed into one large translucent shard, with Merlin trapped motionless within. She runs her hand across it, and then playfully Morgana flicks the crystal. It rings with resonance, and unable to hide her glee behind her hand, she giggles and begins to laugh out loud. The cavern echoes with laughter, but there is no time for Morgana to revel in her victory, as a voice echoes back at her from the tunnels ahead. "Over here!" Betrayed by her own laugh, the 2 knights have found her. She turns to see torchlight coming down the passageway and considers for a moment. She could stay and fight, but the spell had weakened her. Besides, Merlin had been bound, and she had won. Morgana smiles and slips silently into the darkness, lingering only to watch the knights' faces as they see her handiwork. Around her, she felt the great red dragon's protections weaken as Merlin's influence was severed from the world. Places once closed were now open, and with the speed of a black widow, Morgana slipped from shadow to shadow to places once hidden from her. In these sealed chambers, where none but Merlin had walked, she found the book, and a universe of terrible possibility opened up for her. Time stands still for Merlin within his crystal prison. Unable to move in any physical way, he roams the land now only as a shadow, watching as the passage of time continues ever onward, days turning to weeks, and years into decades, unable to be freed from his prison. Merlin's tomb, and even his name, would fall into the realms of myths and legends. Mankind would continue to progress, however, in knowledge and technology. Their creations of ever more deadly and destructive weapons would ultimately prove futile, however, against a new, more ruthless enemy. It is the latter half of the 21st century when humanity learns the truth about the vile intentions of a secretive alien visitor known only as the Greys. Their plan to take human DNA and combine it with their own in an attempt to perpetuate their species. The discovery began a spiralling argument which would result in the beginning of an intergalactic war for survival. All attempts to reason with the alien visitors were now in vain, and a bloody, brutal war would result in the devastation of over half the Earth's ecosystem, as well as the loss of over 2/3 of humanity itself. The war seemed without end, and continued for almost 80 years. In a desperate attempt to save those who remained from total annihilation, an order came down from high up in military command to take captured alien technology and begin construction of several large deep space-faring craft, large enough for those who remained to flee the Earth and exodus to the uncharted depths of space. It has been over 200 years since that fateful day, and humanity has roamed the stars searching for a new home ever since. Some have settled on small moons and in difficult terrains on alien worlds. Some continue to drift among the stars and split into ever smaller groups in the hope that they may be taken in by a kindly alien species. Now, in disarray, humanity's numbers begin to dwindle, and some have come to accept the Greys as their ruling overlords. But for others, the war rages on. Present day. Stars streak by as two Hammerhead-class human battleships traverse the enormous expanse of space. Each is wrapped within its own high-density gravitational field, allowing these heavily armed military vessels to travel faster than the speed of light. The United Human Colonies Nautilus and UHC Boudica, however, are not alone. In hot pursuit and closing in fast is a most formidable sight. At over 5 times their size is a Cateran Dreadnought-class battlecruiser. The Caterans are an amphibian species, loyal to the Greys. Once conquered by them, they had pledged their undying allegiance to their new masters. Now serving as marshals for the Greys, they would dispense their masters' laws without question. Gaining ground at a considerable pace, and now within striking distance of its prey, the Dreadnought unleashes a barrage of torpedoes on the trailing Nautilus. Already in trouble, the Nautilus falls even further behind its sister ship. Its gravitational running fields flicker and dims momentarily as the torpedoes strike the ship's hull. Plasma flames of blue and purple erupt, then die in the vacuum of space as pieces of the ship's armour tumble off in a debris trail, like the tail of a comet. The Nautilus returns fire with a wash of highly charged plasma bolts that strike the Dreadnought with little or no effect. The Dreadnought is neither hindered nor slowed by the Nautilus attack. The bridge of the UHC Boudica is almost oval-shaped, longer than it is wide, with 2 operational areas, one on either side of the central control area. A full-size floor-to-ceiling view screen wraps around the forward area of the bridge, adorning its walls and ceiling. Now dimly lit and in full combat mode, there is a thick sense of tension in the air. The flicker of holographic view screens illuminates the anticipation on the crew's faces as they await their orders. At the heart of the bridge is the captain's chair. Residing in command is one of humanity's best, and one of UHC's finest, Captain Rhodes. Born into the military as most on board were, she has served one of the most outstanding and decorated careers in the fleet. This black mid-40 woman had seen more than her fair share of combat and served in one of humanity's most difficult hours at the Battle of the Crimson Sea. For her part in the battle, she earned one of the military's highest awards, the Medal of the Burning Star. A young red-haired crewman looks up from his monitor. His fingers continue to adjust the instruments before him. "Ma'am, the Nautilus is losing power." A holographic diagram in front of the young crewman is showing multiple system failures. A power grid that runs throughout the Nautilus flickers and dies for a second on the screen. He looks disgruntled and is obviously agitated. The captain leans forward, her face illuminated by the screens that adorn the sides of her chair. She calls out into the ship's darkness. "Extend our shields around the Nautilus. We'll drag her if we have to." The bridge crew are now desperately wrestling with the controls, but no one more than the red-haired man, Crewman Ingram. The Dreadnought unleashes yet another barrage of missiles on the Nautilus. The first 4 missiles strike the extended shield, weakening it enough to allow the rest of the missiles to penetrate. There is unbelievable carnage as the hull of the Nautilus ruptures. It creaks and moans as it begins to break apart. One of the forward sections of Boudicca's view screens separates into a square section of static as crewman Ingram calls out to the captain once more. "Incoming transmission from the Nautilus, ma'am." Captain Rhodes sharply responds. "On screen, crewman." The image is blurry, smoke-filled and pixelated. The fair-haired captain of the Nautilus can hardly be seen amidst the smoke and flames. In total distress, he begins to speak to the viewer. "Captain Rhodes, we can't keep up. Our running shields have completely failed." Captain Rhodes leans forward once again. Her voice trembles with emotion. "Captain Harper, Stephen, I'm not leaving you." Captain Harper gasps for air, coughs, and continues. "Captain Rhodes." He coughs again as he breathes in the noxious fumes that begin to fill the Nautilus's bridge. "Captain Rhodes," he says sternly, then in a gentler, compassionate voice continues to say, "Maggie, save yourself, save your crew. There's nothing more you can do here." He coughs again and struggles with his words. "Perhaps we can buy you some time." He turns and gestures to the unseen crew member to kill the transmission. Captain Rose cries out, but it is in vain. "Stephen, no!" On board the Boudicca, crewman Ingram shakes his head as the view screen turns to an image of hyperspace. "We've lost contact, ma'am." Captain Rhodes taps frantically on one of her display screens that adorns the armrest of her chair. In frustration, she thumps her fist down hard on one of the chair's arms. "Damn you, Stephen! You're not doing this to me!" Then she swings sharply around to her right and calls out to her intelligence officer, who is intently monitoring the situation. "Amy, what the hell are they doing?" Within the dimly lit room is the petite figure of a young woman with long brown hair. Her large dark eyes catch the light of the display consoles as she turns to face the captain. Beneath her fringe we see a gentle face in deep concentration. "Their gravity well is collapsing, ma'am. They've been thrown into sublight speeds, and they're diverting marine power to the plasma cannons." Captain Rose stays focused on the young woman. Her voice is stern and determined. "Stay with them, Amy." Amy glances up once again. "Yes, ma'am." Amy's voice remains calm, while her hands dart swiftly across the console. She manipulates the three-dimensional readout with great competence. "Matching velocities and trajectories now, ma'am. This is going to be rough." The ship creaks and groans as it is brought just within integral tolerances, dropping out of its gravity drive and banking around in order to rejoin the flailing Nautilus, which spins violently out of control. Captain Rose swings her chair around to face the main forward view screen again. "Lieutenant Round, charge plasma cannons and load all torpedo tubes." A male officer, sat to the captain's left, turns toward her. He nods his head, and with a resolute look upon his face, replies firmly, "Yes, ma'am." End of part 1.